Oh, right. Okay, so
So hello again.
hello, Jay.
Hi.
Hi.
It's super nice to see you. So is it safe to assume that nothing notable has happened with your parents since the last time we talked? I guess in real time it's been about a couple weeks.
So I was talking with my mom over the weekend, and we're talking about all the usual things about like how things going and what's going on and what you do this weekend. And I had another of my laser hair removal sessions,
Oh.
and so I mentioned, I said, so I had a laser hair removal session in the morning, and then I went to do whatever I did in the afternoon. She didn't seem to react much at the time, but maybe she just didn't want to get into it. She kind of doesn't talk too much about some of that stuff.
How often do you have to go back for laser hair removal?
Oh, it's about every 6 weeks for 6 sessions.
But then you're good for the rest of your life, or?
I mean, what they say is that it's, I guess, by the FDA or whatever, rather than being permanent hair removal, they have to describe it as permanent hair reduction or something. The gist of it being just that kind of a wide laser or whatever it is, and so um, it greatly reduces hair, but because it's not pinpointing individual hairs, like say electrolysis, um, if you happen to miss one, then obviously that one wouldn't be affected.
Interesting.
So what I've heard of what some trans girls do, and what I think I plan on doing, is basically doing laser hair removal to get the gist of it, and then getting stragglers with electrolysis.
Okay.
Because electrolysis hurts a lot more. So that's why you want to minimize that part. Yeah.
You know what? Up until now, I thought that those two things were synonyms.
Electrolysis basically is where they individually target hairs and then electrocute the hair follicle. And if it sounds like that it hurts, well, I'm told, yeah, it does.
You had asked me earlier if I had ideas for how to get your parents to accept the name change, and at the time,
Right,
my
yeah.
only idea was guilt based.
At the
In
time,
that
anyway.
in that same episode, we were talking about paperwork and legal name change and things, and I didn't
Right.
know if maybe you wanted to fast track that and say, "Hey, check it out!
Surprise!
I updated my driver's license. It says Ashley now."
I don't know if I want to just throw him in the deep end like that.
Well, it's an idea.
I
You
mean,
could
just
at least you might use it as a backup and say, "No, look, this is how serious I am," depending on how the conversation goes.
it's true, but I would rather have them come along with me, I guess, just since, well, as the saying goes, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your relatives.
Hmm.
So if I fuck things up with my parents, well, I'm kind of screwed, in a sense. I can't choose new parents, is what I'm saying.
Right, right, right. I didn't know if you meant that they would come along with you to the judge when you're getting your
No,
name legally
no, that
changed.
would be a pipe dream. I mean, it'd be really nice,
Okay.
but I just meant metaphorically that they would,
Yeah.
um, I would want to do it maybe at a place where they would be more willing, or at least it'd be plausible that they could at least understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Because thus far, I mean, I've mentioned to them about so the some of the plans around work, that once I transition at work, people will be calling me Ashley. At the same time, I haven't expressly asked them to call me Ashley yet. And while most people kind of put two and two together as far as, oh, this transgender person wants to be known by this name, I'm not sure they fully understand that this is just how I am. This is not like I don't do this on Tuesdays and Thursdays or
You're
something.
not pretending.
Well, I'm not only not pretending, it's not a hobby.
Right.
It's not something I do just every now and then. This is just me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The last time we talked, you had just gotten back from work on the same day, I think, that you came out to your manager
Right.
and set things in motion, and they said that they would talk to the HR person.
So yeah, I came out to my boss, and he said that he was going to talk with the HR guy. And it's so I should clarify, in case people hadn't seen the last episode,
Hmm.
that there's a person at work who does HR stuff, but that is not his sole job function. So he does other things, and well, they need to have someone do HR stuff, and for whatever reason, he's the person that does HR stuff. So all that to say is just that it's not his full-time HR thing. Otherwise, I might have gone to see him first. So my boss went to talk with him, and it's now been a couple weeks since when I came out to my boss. So some documents put it up from HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, about transitioning at work. And I gave a set to my boss and a spare set that he could then give to the HR guy. So between last time and now, things were kind of dragging a little bit. I guess in maybe the last week or so, I would kind of check up on my boss, like how are things going? And essentially what it seemed like was that my boss wasn't really getting around to things.
Oh.
But as of, say, earlier this week, what came to light is that it turns out the HR guy was actually, as my boss put it, not doing his homework. He had, quote, flipped through the documents, but he hadn't read them.
Okay.
Right. So my boss then kind of gave the HR guy some nudges. Hey, you should finish those up, and we can then talk things through and whatever.
You weren't at this point working toward a deadline? I remember you suggested to the manager maybe we could do this in a couple weeks and then do another thing a week after.
Right, so I suggested like 2 or 3 weeks, maybe have the announcement, then a week after that, have the transition. And I was kind of building in the Scotty principle into some of that.
Right. Multiply by a factor of 4 so that it gets done on time.
Exactly, right. Although not quite a factor of 4, but I was, in a nutshell, I was being optimistic with the 2-3 weeks, so that when invariably it went long, it would be kind of still acceptable. And
like when a restaurant tells you it'll be 20 minutes and it's actually 10, under-promising and over-delivering.
So I had recommended the 2 to 3 weeks, and basically it's already been the 2 to 3 weeks, just without much seemingly going on. But essentially, what my boss suggested to the HR guy was, hey, how about the two of us meet Thursday morning, 9 a.m., and make sure you've read through all the documents by then, and we'll talk through our issues.
Okay.
So that was today. So they had their meeting, and what I did actually today was I arrived at work a little bit early, around maybe 9:30 or so. Not that, I mean, I knew they didn't need me in this meeting, but at the same time, my boss is sometimes easily distracted by things. And so one thing I should also mention is that when my boss was talking about how he had set up this meeting with the HR guy, that the plan after that was then to have a meeting with the three of us. So the HR guy, my boss, and me.
Okay.
And at that point, presumably the HR guy, my boss, would have figured out their questions. And then at the meeting with me, they would ask me those questions and work out those finer details.
And we're thinking about really minute, nitty-gritty, detail kind of questions.
Well, at the time, I didn't know what kind of questions they would be.
Okay.
And as well, when my boss was giving me this update, the HR guy hadn't finished reading things at the time, so he didn't know what his questions would be either. So I got into work a bit early, around 9:30, just since I know my boss has a lot of things going on, and if theoretically the meeting between my boss and the HR guy finished up, and they went and came to me and said, okay, when would you like to have our meeting? I could theoretically say, well, how about now? We could do it now.
Okay.
Just because that way they couldn't put it off and, oh, sorry, we'll have to do that tomorrow. Turns out it didn't quite work out that way, but we set the meeting up for 4 o'clock this afternoon. We met in one of the conference rooms. Well, there are only 2 conference rooms, but because it's not a very big company. But so it was the HR guy, my manager, and me. And a lot of it was just kind of ordinary type things as far as, for instance, they asked me, how would you like us to present this to the employees? And I said, well, one option is you could sort of have an announcement per team, or you could have like a by floor.
Was any of this covered in the HRC docs that you printed up?
They were kind of covered, but sort of in a more general sense. I mean, it
Okay.
would say something like, there should be an announcement to employees. And,
Okay.
and it went into some more detail after that. It wasn't just
Yeah, yeah.
as bare as that. But obviously, it doesn't, the HRC documents aren't aware of what size company you work for and how the things are broken down, whatever. So my manager and the HR guy and me talked about some of just, I guess, the mechanics of setting up the announcement thing. And when the meeting first started, one of the first things that the HR guy said to me was, I want to applaud you for the courage that you have.
Hmm.
So it really started things off on the right foot. It showed that he
Sure.
was supportive. And as the HR guy told it, he read through the documents and he was sort of familiar on a cursory level about transgender situations, but he was not terribly familiar until he read through the documents, and then he
Okay.
came to understand things better. So I thought that was quite a good sign as far as how things started off. And then we went to some of the mechanics of how we announced to things. And we also talked about some possible dates for figuring things out. So one thing I did was, anticipating that this could occur, I had printed out some little PDF calendars, just a single sheet monthly. And on these calendars is just the month of September, which is the current month.
Hmm.
And because I figured we're going to be talking about dates, and it'd be easier just to be able to point to things instead of everyone whipping out their smartphones or
Okay.
whatever, just to sort of be on the same page with stuff. So anyway, so today would be Thursday the 15th, I think,
Yeah.
of September. Well, what they asked me that kind of brought some of this up was, what kind of dates would you like to go with? And I thought that was quite accommodating of them to ask me rather than kind of just dictating that sort of thing. But so I brought out the printout calendar thing. And today being Thursday the 15th, I kind of showed like, well, what if we had an announcement maybe sometime next week and then had a transition date sometime the week after that.
Hmm.
And what they mentioned was that they still have a few other smaller details to work through. And so they suggested, well, what if we work through some of the remaining details next week, and then the week after that have the announcement, and then the following week have the transition date. So the transition date, if all goes to plan, would be early October, like within the first few days of October.
And when are your parents coming to visit?
October 14th, I believe, whatever
Okay.
weekend is closest to that.
Are you no longer scared at all that your company might find an excuse to fire you? Do you feel like they're all totally on board and they're not hiding anything from you?
I am much less worried now, in
Okay.
part because one of the things we covered in the meeting is that the HR guy, so the company has about 50 employees, give or take. And obviously there are some HR policies. I'm guessing most of them are kind of boilerplate stuff. But one of the things he wants to do as part of this transition is to establish or slash amend the company non-discrimination policy so that it includes not only the usual stuff about race, religion, ethnicity, but also include sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression.
And some of that was prompted by the HRC stuff that you printed out,
Yes,
is that right?
yes. Indeed, the HRC stuff recommends things like amend one's non-discrimination policy, and so it may or may not have been an original idea, but nonetheless, he could have totally skipped over that, and it really helps just in the sense that now it's even less likely that they're going to fire me out for this
Right.
because. So I thought that was a good sign.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, I'm looking forward to next steps there, although it seems glacially slow from where I'm standing, but I do have a history of impatience.
Well, it seems a little slow to me sometimes, but I try to cut them some slack just since this is the first time they're going through this process. I mean, granted, it's the
Sure.
first time I'm going through the process too,
Huh.
but nonetheless, they're even more new to it.
Let me throw you a curveball. What is
Yeah.
the current state and plan with your hair? Because it's getting longer every time we talk.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the back of it in quite a while,
Want to
but
see the back of it?
sure.
Can you sort of, does that help at all?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I guess it's the change is more pronounced from the front anyway. But how would you describe it? Are you happy with it? Do you think that you're still passing as a man at work with your hair like that? Do you do something different during the day?
God,
That was a
Jay, that's like
six-part
100
question.
questions.
You can answer any part of it that you want.
And I was going to Tashi Station to pick up some power converters. Okay. So before I forget, there was one other piece to that meeting with the HR guy. We can come back to
Oh,
that later.
all right.
It's the tricky part. Just tell me that and I'll jog my memory. So
Okay.
anyhow, so hair stuff. My plan is to grow out my hair, in part because it'll help me pass, but also because it'll help me feel more like the gender that I am.
Hmm.
In January, I came out to my hairstylist. So 9 months ago, and I mentioned to her I'd like to grow my hair out, and in addition to coming out to her as trans. And one of the things that she recommended was rather than just let it grow and not cut it at all, to trim it strategically so that I don't end up with a mullet. So the basic idea is that because if you just let it grow, then it'll grow much more. Well, it would grow equally, but it'd be much more evident in the back, and it would look stupid. So essentially, what she went about doing was slightly over the months trimming the back while letting the rest of it grow out. So it'd kind of work its way into sort of a pixie cut or a bob, rather than just being like this goofy mullet looking thing. So, indeed, yeah, I do want to grow my hair out, and
What's an ideal length for you?
I would at least want shoulder length hair.
Okay. That's about what you had when we first met.
Indeed, that was the other part I was gonna get to, because this is not the first time I've had my hair grown out.
Yeah.
That 7 or 8 years ago or
Hmm.
whatever. Yeah, I had grown out my hair to about shoulder length, and
I want to think that you cut it drastically for the first time in maybe 2004.
yeah, probably about that.
Might
Yeah,
have been a little bit later, but yeah. When
right.
when we were first getting to know each other, you sort of had the hair of the person on the little Dutch boy paint can, unless they've
I
updated
don't
their logo.
exactly recall that, but is that? I'm guessing it's not flattering.
On little Dutch boys, it works.
God.
I don't know. It was the way that you had your hair. It wasn't. I didn't think of it was flattering or unflattering.
Okay, well,
I liked it better when you cut it short, but
yeah.
it didn't make me like you more as a person.
Okay, that's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair. I mean, that's sort of yet another one of those things where looking back, at the time when I was growing my hair out to get to that point, I just always wanted to grow my hair out. So it just felt like something that'd be fun
Hmm.
or that would be more of a fit for me at the time I was growing out the first time. But in retrospect, it probably was me wanting to head in more of a feminine hairstyle, but I may not have consciously been aware of all those bits and pieces.
At the time, you might have thought, well, I like heavy metal, and that's how they wear their hair.
That could have been part of it, and I do
Yeah.
like metal.
Sure, who doesn't? Well, people. Some people don't.
Hey,
We got some comments on previous episodes and elsewhere on the web that I thought
we didn't
maybe
finish
I'd
talking
throw
about the
at you.
meeting.
There's a tricky part.
Right, so we're going over the usual things like pronouns, and most of them are just like, okay, check, 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 and yep, no problem, we can do that. And then the next part they wanted to ask about was the quote unquote bathroom issue.
Oh.
Right. So naturally, when I'm presenting as female, I would use the ladies' room. And in fact, because I'm out at most places other than work, I'm over weekends and evenings, whatever. If I'm going to the mall or to the Barnes& and Noble or whatever, I'll use the ladies' room. And I've actually, I've not run into any problems doing so. Part of it is that, of course, I would feel uncomfortable and potentially unsafe to go and use the men's room when I'm dressed because I do not, whether I pass 100%, I can't say, but I nonetheless, when I'm dressed, I do not pass as a man.
Right.
So I would be concerned about
Okay.
harassment or what have you. And actually, using the ladies' room has been fine. It's, as you expect, pretty boring. You do your thing, you wash your hands.
Some of them are quite nice.
Yeah.
I've seen mirrors with lights that aren't broken and comfortable chairs and even a couch on occasion.
Yeah, you sometimes get that. So anyhow, in these documents from HRC, as far as transitioning at work, one of the things they go over is sort of the restroom facilities kind of thing. And they stress that employees, once they transition, should not use the facilities of their birth gender, that they should be using the facilities of the gender as they're presenting.
Okay.
Which I think
is what you want.
Yes. This is something that I find that sometimes is of concern to people who are in the category of, they understand transgender on an intellectual level, but emotionally, some parts of them aren't quite there yet.
Right.
And so my boss, the HR guy, weren't quite sure about how the bathroom thing would work. Well, that I specifically, I mentioned that I would prefer to use the ladies' room, and that how when I'm over weekends when I'm out and so on, I would do so, and I haven't come across any issues.
Yeah.
In addition to specifying that preference, I specifically conveyed that I would feel uncomfortable to use the men's room.
Mm-hmm.
And so they kind of hemmed and hawed, and they conveyed that they still didn't have a firm decision or whatever about that.
Wow.
One middle ground that is an option is that if a company has, say, a men's room and a ladies' room, and then maybe a single stall bathroom for persons with disabilities, that may be an option as a temporary measure, maybe for a month or two for transgender folks. While not an ideal situation, at least that person wouldn't be going into a bathroom not matching up with their gender presentation.
Okay. Is that for the sake of the other employees?
That's largely the ruse. Well, ruse might not be the right word, but that's largely the pretense of why that may be an option.
Does that imagining make you feel sort of second-class citizen-y at all?
Imagining that does make me feel sort of second-class citizen-y, because it's sort of like, it's like you have your own water fountain, your own bathroom, and it's not, at the same time, it's not as bad as if I were to have been forced to use the men's room.
Okay.
But all the same, that happens to be kind of just an overall general option for companies.
Yeah.
But in the building in which we work, there are no single stall bathrooms. There are men's and there are women's. And there's a handicap accessible stall in each of them, but there's not a specific single stall bathroom for persons with disabilities. So from my point of view, it kind of is sort of a process of elimination thing that I would not feel comfortable at all using the men's room. I would not feel good about that.
Yeah.
At all. And so that kind of,
like most women, I imagine.
Right. Yeah. If on the rare chance that was their decision, I would sooner either go to another floor and use the ladies' room or go to a nearby business or something, because I would feel extremely uncomfortable. So considering that, sort of a process of elimination thing, well, I guess that sort of leaves the ladies' room. And I think it's that my boss, the HR person, may just sort of have to get their heads around that. And I think as well, they probably don't realize how different I look when I'm in drag, which is to say wearing boy clothes at work,
Right.
as compared with when I'm wearing gender appropriate clothes and makeup
Yeah.
and a bra and all that. So I don't know how that part's going to quite work out. And admittedly, my boss and HR guy said that there's no, they don't know what they're going to do. It's not like they were kind of pushing for one or the other, but they said that they're still figuring that part out. So that's one of the things that they're hoping to work out for next week.
So Dinah asked on our website, she said, I'd be curious if you remember what initial advice from the first call to
Right.
the transgender support line was
Oh,
before you
sure.
decided to follow up with calling the personal cell phone number.
A lot of what she talked about was kind of a reassurance type of thing, conveying to me that that being transgender is normal and that there's nothing wrong with being transgender. I would imagine, of course, that the transgender helpline would get all kinds of different people calling, and it's possible that some people may be distraught or in otherwise bad shape when calling. And so she may have been kind of gauging some of that and just trying to reassure me that it gets better, as it were. So she mentioned some of the kind of reassuring things and that did actually help. Just since I mean, I'd known that it was a normal thing, but just to kind of hear someone say that kind of helped. She also mentioned about how in Dallas there's a decent group of transgender people. I mean, not a group as in anything organized, but as far as just a decent population of transgender people. And just kind of reassuring me that I wasn't alone in things. So one of the things I asked was, I should probably talk to a gender therapist about something like this. Is there someone you could recommend? Because, of course, I knew there's some out there, but I didn't know them one from the other. And so Blair recommended, well, you should go see Felicia. Everyone goes to see Felicia. And I'm guessing it wasn't a literal everyone, but that significant number. And I thought, okay, well, that's good to know. And later on, as I was kind of evaluating different gender therapists in the area, I say evaluating, but that's kind of being a bit generous. Really, I was just kind of looking at their website and trying to figure them out. And that was kind of it ended up being that Blair's comments recommending Felicia was kind of one of the tiebreakers there, just because, like when you're choosing a dentist or a doctor, I mean, those personal recommendations kind of go a long way. Because other than that, I mean, I'm not a dentist, for example. I couldn't evaluate their skills. So that was one of the things that Blair mentioned as far as recommending Felicia. And I think I asked her something along the lines of, well, what do I do now? How do I do this? And she said, well, you just got to be a girl. Just buy some clothes and some makeup and be a girl. And while it was well-meaning advice, and as Obi-Wan would say, true from a certain point of view, it was a very blunt way of putting it, I thought. I mean, in retrospect, it wasn't that she was demanding that I be a girl, but she was just saying, this is what you should need to do. Do this. And at the time, I thought, well, yeah, I want to be a girl, but at the time I was making that call, I was looking for some way to kind of ease into things or, kind of figure things out before jumping in head first. And so Blair's advice of buying the clothes, the makeup, and so on, those are all things I would do eventually, but in retrospect, it was kind of a hasty recommendation, I thought. I mean, nonetheless, she was very supportive, and she talked about things like how for years she had been trying to work things out, and I believe she was 36 or 38 at the time that I had called her, so she had started into things even a little bit later than I had, but yeah, so that's sort of what we talked about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, why don't you teach me something girly?
Sure, yeah. So I've got two bits about painting one's nails.
Oh, yeah?
So these are not products per se. Well, one's a product and one's sort of a set of advicey bits.
Sure. Let me try to remember what you told me earlier. It
Yeah.
was, I don't remember the first thing, but then there were 2 coats of nail polish and then a top coat.
Yeah.
What was the first thing? It wasn't called primer, was it?
No, but that's close. I mean, it's the same basic idea. It's the base coat.
Base coat.
It's just like when you're painting your bathroom or whatever. Well, which is to say
You
the
might
two
remember
coats of
that I
paint.
never finished painting the bathroom.
Oh, right. Oops. Anyway.
I got,
Yeah.
yeah. So what do you want to tell me, though?
Yeah. Okay. So did we talk about the duration between coats and such?
I remember hearing that it took a long time, and I was surprised by that because in my experience, when I would paint someone's nails, it seemed like only 5 or 6 minutes before they were up and about again.
So these are what I did. This is from 2 weeks ago, and this is a gel nail polish. And as you can see, they're basically in really pretty darn good shape, I think.
For 2 weeks,
Um,
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with how this works. So essentially, they paint the color in your nails, and then you put them under a UV light for 5 or 10 minutes, and which cures it. And then it's hard. It's done.
And a UV light is something that you can just buy for yourself?
Well, are you familiar with the salamander, a cooking device?
No,
Evidently not.
I have not
Okay.
cooked any salamanders.
No, it's not for cooking salamanders, but I don't know why they
Not
call it
yet.
salamander. Anyway, okay, you're familiar with the toaster oven, say.
Uh-huh.
So it's sort of like a toaster oven, except instead of a heating coil, it's a UV light. So it's a box that's,
Okay.
yay deep, and this is why you stick your hands in, and it's got little UV lights in it. I think the idea is so that your nails get evenly
Cooked.
cooked, as it were.
Mm.
Yes, evenly exposed to UV light
Okay.
might be a better way of putting it. And so, of course, if you go to a nail salon, they paint your nails. Yeah, once they're done painting them, and you sort of sit in the chair waiting to dry a little bit more before driving off. Even then, they're a little bit fragile, you might say. You wouldn't normally want to just go stuff your hand into your purse to grab your keys or something like that. Perhaps more gingerly extract your keys. But with these, once they finished, they took a small hand towel and they were just kind of like taking off like I guess maybe there had been some extra polish that had kind of ended up on the
Gets
sides.
on your skin. Okay.
Yeah, but essentially it was cured enough that they could rub it with a towel and it would not affect the
Super.
finish. So I mean, it's really hard, and it's been pretty fantastic. I mean, because it's about 2 weeks, and there's sort of a very small micro piece that's come off on one nail, but they've essentially been it's been great.
And you described that
Fantastic.
as a gel nail polish. What is the word that you would use for one that isn't a gel?
I think maybe it's like a marketing term or something.
Oh, really?
I mean, because normal nail polishes you would not cure with a UV light.
Right.
You would just let them dry in the air and so on.
Okay. But so is that the term that people would look for if they want UV cured nails? They would look for the word gel, or would they look for a UV?
Typically, yeah. And the thing I should point out is that I believe the makers of these gel polishes are focusing a lot of their efforts on nail salons. So even though there are some stores where you can buy sort of the gel polishes and so on, it may be just a certain salon that has them.
Okay.
And even then, you need both pieces to it. You need the gel polish and the UV light.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just use any old polish or what have you.
Was this super more expensive?
At the time, I had a pedicure and manicure, and it worked out. It was a little bit more expensive, maybe $5 or $8 more. I don't remember the exact amount. So it was.
You talk to me in terms of percentages, and then figure in
It
the
may have
fact
been
that they've
14.
lasted a whole lot longer.
It may have been 1/7 more, so 14%. kind of guessing
All
here.
right.
One downside I should point out potentially is that because you need special polishes and you can't just use any polish, typically a salon that has gel polishes will have sort of the selection wall or whatever of here are all the polishes you can choose, and then sort of a smaller bin or what have you
Hmm.
of the gel polishes.
Okay.
And at the salon that one of my girlfriends and I went to at the time, they had maybe a few dozen colors, which sounds like a lot, although a lot of them were variations on red and
Yeah, yeah.
pink. So
Hmm.
as far as darker colors, this was one of the few in sort of that darker shade. But if you can find a color that you like, I can totally recommend it. It's really nice. Very, very durable.
Would you say that this new development is the iPhone of nail polish? Do you think that it's going to take over the industry and you'll be able to buy salamander cooking machines at CVS along with racks and racks of colors?
I think it looks really promising, but at the same time, it's such a new thing that it may take a while for salons to kind of get up to speed on it. At the same time, I also stopped by Ulta the other day, and so MZ has had an end cap on gel nail polish jobbies.
Okay.
And the polishes, I don't think were too expensive, but the UV light salamanders you put it was like a $50 thing,
Yeah.
which obviously you only have to buy once,
Well,
but
theoretically.
yeah, theoretically. But for people who are kind of price conscious and so on, that's something that, it's a significant thing to buy. Uh, so I'm hoping that it doesn't just die off
Right.
and
Well, it took a while for Apple to introduce third-party apps as well, and the iPhone didn't die in the first year.
that's true. I'm both amused and heartened to the degree which you were stretching this metaphor, but nonetheless,
I've been
hooray. Yeah.
practicing. What was the second
Yeah.
thing you wanted to teach me?
Okay, so the second thing was I just want to talk a bit about how you can make your polishes last longer without
Mm.
chipping, just some sort of general pieces there. So one of the pieces to that is, as I think I may have sort of briefly mentioned on a previous show, is when you're applying the base coat and the first coat and so on, I try to leave about 10 to 15 minutes between coats just so that they can cure somewhat before adding the next one. And I find that helps aid in the overall structural rigidity of your nails. And that's one of the things that when you go to salon, they tend to sort of follow that type of pattern. But because of all the massaging and everything else, it doesn't seem like you're waiting around for things. So that's kind of one of the things that I find helps. The other one, though, which may sound obvious from the start, but there's sort of other facets to it, is that when your nails are painted, you cannot use your nails as tools.
Right.
So one obvious example would be like soda cans. You may be used to just like grab it and then,
Yeah, yeah.
but that will, if not chip, that'll significantly weaken your nails. So what I do actually is just in my kitchen, I have a butter knife that I just leave on the counter basically for soda cans.
Okay.
And so, you just really just, and then it's open. Where at work, actually, I've got this handy dandy access card, which is, boring. But there, I just, it's open.
Way to
And
multitask.
hopefully I'm not like demagnetizing the poor thing in the process. But
Right.
that's sort of one of the things. But I guess on top of that, just as far as the tool bits, for instance, I ordered some new drinking glasses, sort of like these, no, not this exact one. And they each had this little sticker on them, sort of like the sticker you get on a banana or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you might think, oh, I'll just, scrape the sticker off with your nail, but that a bad thing to do. So, indeed, I just haven't used that same butter knife and just kind of help peel that off. And I guess it's sort of one thing I realized even just recently is when you're taking your keys out of your purse, your inclination might be just like, oh, I know what my keys are, and just like mash it, hand
Right.
in, find keys, pull them out. But of course, you may be just ramming your nails head first into your keys or whatever else you got in your purse. So
Mm-hmm.
I find it this is something I'm still working on, that you just kind of be more ginger about it, just placing your hand in and feeling around and what have you, just so you're not literally banging into your metal keys.
Thanks for continuing to help me chronicle this story. It seems to be making people happy. I know it's making me happy, and I
Oh, so
admire your bravery as much as that HR guy, and possibly more so.
well, that's very kind of you, Jay.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah.
I will talk to you soon.
Okay.
Good
Bye.
night. Bye.
Bye.